we will start our session with the invited speakers who has come all the way from Indonesia, a professor in the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Padjadjaran University. He is the head of the Department of Political Science. Please welcome Prof. Dede Mariana.
Good morning. My name is Dede Mariana. I'm professor in Faculty of Social and Political Science, Padjadjaran University in Bandung. I'm come here with Dr. Ari Ganjar. Dr. Ari Ganjar. Oh. We are joined in a research team who led by Professor Yudhistira Garna. Professor Yudhistira Garna, supervisor with Professor Hud Saleh, which study the social change of Baduy people. The research itself would taken for years time, and this is the second year, and this paper is a part of the ongoing research. The paper is supposed to be presented by Professor Yudhistira, but unfortunately, he is not in a good health. On behalf of Yudhistira, I would like to thank you to organize, especially to Professor Hud Saleh. Who is very kind to invite us in this great conference. The title of the paper we are going to present here is the culture of Kampung. Why Kampung Baduy is peace and balance. Baduy is a particular group of people that preserved their own cultural value and way of life for centuries. And result of research in Dr. Ari. Please, Dr. Ari.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. I am Ari Ganjar. I'm from the Political Science Department, Padjadjaran University, and I will present the Kampung Baduy. This is the location of Kampung Baduy. It is located in Java Island, especially in the western part of Java Island, in Banten province. Yeah, sir.
Can you just hold on 5 minutes? We'll sort out the other so that you can also see the screen.
Okay, let's continue. So, Kampung Baduy, located in the Banten province, the western part of Java Island, uh, in the region of Lebak, in district Lewi Damar, and in a village of Kanekes. So the formal name of the village is Kanekes, village Kanekes. As you can see that on the map, in the southern area is the sacral place of for Baduy people. The more the southern, the more sacred the place for them, and almost the whole area is the forest area. Next, please. This is some studies about Baduy. Next, please. So, many researchers are get interesting of from where the Baduy people come from. Many of them believe that the Baduy people is the ancestor of the Sundanese people in the Western Java. However, that theory is criticized because physically the people of Baduy is different from other Sundanese people. The Baduy people is shorter. Their height is approximately 150 centimeters, and the Sundanese is 160 centimeters. I am Sundanese, and also Professor Dede Mariana is Sundanese people. So there a myth, the story about the Baduy people. In the 15th century, when the Islam came to the region, the followers of the Pajajaran, the last kingdom in the West Java, they resist to accept Islam, and they choose to get to refuge deep into the forest, and they preserve their own religion, the cultural, and they resist to accept Islam. So after they realized that they didn't have the sufficient power to fight the Islamization, they choose to isolating themselves from the society. And so if you look at the picture below, that is considered as Prabu Siliwangi, the last Pajajaran king who, in the mythology, they said he resists to not accept Islam. And he, in the supernatural way, he disappeared. He chose to disappear and become a part of the nature. So until now, this myth is sacred to the part of Sundanese people. And the followers, if you look the tigers around the Prabu Siliwangi, they transform into the tiger. So the soldiers transform into the tiger. So the Baduy people is believed as the followers of the Prabu Siliwangi, because in the story of the Baduy people, they many times they spell about the Prabu Siliwangi, of the greatness of the Pajajaran kingdom. So the Baduy people, they conveniently tell that themselves as the orang Parahiang. Parahiang is the people who disappeared. Yeah, Parahiang. So next. So what makes the Baduy people special? They live with harmony with the nature. They very care about the nature around them. They live in the forest. The cultural system and the social organization based on religion. They believe that Batara Tunggal is their god. And Batara Tunggal actually their prominent ancestor and considered as god. And the ancestry of Batara Tunggal, they live in Tangtu. Yeah. So the social organization is based on kinship and kampung. So Tangtu is 3 villages that built based on the relationship of the kinship of the Batara Tunggal. I will explain that later. They live as an ascetic for centuries. So they're known as the people who live with thousands of prohibitions. They could not leave the kampung without permission from the Pu'un. Pu'un is the religious leader, the prominent leader. They do not accept electricity until now. So if you bring the electronic devices to the village and you got caught up, the devices will be crushed, okay? But no hard feeling for them. Yeah. So it is prohibited to bring the digital or technological devices. And there are some taboo, dewasa, buyut, prohibition and taboo. Thousands, they live in just an ascetic, like a monk. And they believe as the chunk of the pre-Islamic Sundanese culture history before Islam come to West Java. So the questions the researcher always asked for centuries ago, and I think it's still relevant today, could Baduy people preserve their life appropriate to their cultural pattern in the middle of modern society? I would like to inform you that the Baduy location is 150 kilometers from Jakarta, the biggest city in Indonesia, and just 6 hours travel by car from Bandung and also Bogor. So surround the Baduy is modern and industrialized society. Next, please. So this is the area of Baduy. This is the cultural space. So if you see in the upper side, Lower Tutupan, this is the very sacred forest. No one can enter to the forest except for the Pu'un, the religious leader. And the Archao Domas is the ancient site that believed is the center of the earth. So instead, the people is not accepting Islam, but they are mixed some of Islam values. For example, they admit that Nabi Adam is the first human in the earth, and the center of the earth is located in the Baduy, especially in Archao Domas. So, if you see Huma Serang, Huma is the kind of rice field, but it's dry rice field. And Serang, the production of the rice field is will be given to the leaders of the kampung. And all the kampung member will voluntarily give their job in Huma Serang. And in the middle is Tangtu. Tangtu is very sacred kampung. There is 3 kampungs in Tangtu. The first is Cikesik. Cikesik culturally is in the top of cultural hierarchy, not in social hierarchy. Yeah. Because Cikesik leader is perceived as the direct ancestry from the Batara Tunggal. And the second one is the matrilineal lineage of the Batara Tunggal is Cikatawana, and the third is Cibeo. So I said this is culturally hierarchy, but not socially, because the leader of the kampung has no special treatment in a socially sense. Yeah. So before the law, they are equal. The people also didn't give the honor to the Pu'un, so they are very equal each other. So beside the Tangtu, is panamping. Oh yeah, before I explain the panamping, Tangtu, every kampung is restricted to only 40 families. So if the population is grown up, they will choose the member of the kampung to be expelled to the panamping, to kampung panamping. Yeah. And the one who broke the law or considered broke the law, they expelled to the Dangka, but Dangka still considered as their member. In Panamping, now there are 41 of Panamping, 47 kampungs, and Dangka now is only 3. Yeah. So, next please. This is the Kaneka's population. This is the problem, I think. In 1822, there are 700 people live in Kanekas, and in 1928 there are 1,500 people, and in recent statistic in 2008 there are 10,000 people. So in the same area, the number of people are doubled. Next, please. So this is the number of kampung. The Tangtu is still the same. There are 3 Tangtu, and the Panamping is become double the size. Yeah. And the Dangka from 7 now become 2, and recently there are 2 Dangka. So in 1891 there are 11 kampung, and in 2006 there are 57 kampung. Next. So the challenges. So if you see that the number of people are larger, but the area is the same, so the narrowing of arable land due to the increasing of population, they are sharing a very little space for production for their consumption. And declining soil fertility, because the mode of production is shifting cultivators. In the 100 years ago, the period of cultivating about 5 to 7 years before they came to the same spot. Now, because the number of people is rising, they take 2 to 4 years period to come to the same spot. Yeah. So the soil quality, soil fertility is lower now, and the production and consequently is also lower. And consequently, the fulfillment of life increasingly rely on market economy. They sell their goods, their craft to the market, and they travel a lot outside of their kampung. Next, please. This is the challenges. For example, the music. The music is very sacred and only played in the annually festival, religion festival. But now the music can be played every day. When there are tourists come to the kampung, they play music. And the government also forcing a way of good health. So the increasing of the population is also get intervention from the government. So the level of healthiness of the people is increasing, and the number of people is also increasing. And as you see that, maybe we can see the commodification. Baduy is become the major tourism destination in Banten. So annually the government make a festival of Baduy, Seba Baduy. And you can see that the cultural feature of Baduy also become a trend in fashion. So now Baduy is highly intense in contact with outsider. As you can see that the tourists have a picture together with the Baduy people. Next, please. So, could Baduy survive? they have the high capacity of adaptability with the outsider. However, in the internal, they're still strong to undergo the pikukuh. Pikukuh is the norm, is the basic value. They do it every day, yeah, in a single day. Gunung temenang dilebur, the mountain should not be tampered with. Lebak temenang diruksak, the value should not be destroyed. Larangan temenang dirempak, the prohibition should not be violated. Buyut temenang dirubah, tabu should not be changed. Lojor temenang dipotong, length should be not cut. Pondok temenang disambung, short should be not spiced. Nu lain kudu dilainkeun, the other should be viewed as other. Nu ulah kudu diulahkeun, the prohibition should be kept as it is. Nu enya kudu diinyakeun, the rightness should be struggled. And the conclusion, next please. Pikukuh is applied with loyalty in every family in Kampung Baduy, because the meaning of kampung to them is more than as a living area. It is a social bond between the residents to preserve the just of balance. The just of balance among the people, among the family, between the leader and its member, in using and taking benefit from the nature for the living. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Any questions? I really appreciate. Please. Yes.
Has there been any case of migration by the people of that village outside?
Yeah, when the people they broke the law, yeah, or accepting Islam, they move to the outsider, the outside of the area. But many of the outsiders still practicing the value of Baduy, but in religion term they practicing Islam. Yeah. So if you broke the law or you change the religion, you should expelled from the area of Kampung. Yes, please.
Fascinating. Is it written down, the Bikuku? Is it written down? Is it documented? Where did you extract it from?
Pikuku, so the Baduy written is prohibited. So the Pikuku you displayed is for the visitor to respect the rule inside the Baduy. In Baduy itself, the written thing is prohibited. Yeah, so how they transfer knowledge is by story, is by words. Thank you. Any question? You still have time or?
So, which means to
Yes.
say that most of the people, or all the people in that village are illiterate,
Yes.
they cannot read and write.
No. They can, but they should expel from the kampung. Yes.
Who decides what is right and what is wrong in the Bikuku expression of balance?
It is the Pu'un. Pu'un, the leader of the religion.
And he derives his mandate, he derives his authority from where?
It is commonly by ancestor, but it's ancestor, but it also could chosen from the leader of the kampung. So
You will have a majlis of elders to decide
yeah,
payment of the
yeah, yeah. It could be from the father to the son, or from the Pu'un to the little brother. Yeah. But it is patrilineal. Yes, sir.
If I follow the question of my colleague, there is no collective decision making.
If there's a problem, they will go to Jaro. Jaro is the leader of the kampung outside the Tuanku. Yeah, they will, if the problem is very hard to decide, they will give the decision to the Pu'un or to the Jaro. So before that, they always sit down together to talk about the problem. Yeah.
In terms of economy, how they survive?
So
Their village.
yeah, some good they buy from the outsider. For example, the not clothes, the row of the clothes, textiles.
Textile.
The textile they bought from Majalaya, but they're spinning the textile to be the cloth for them.
How they get money? They sell something?
Yeah, they sell the rice. So the rice, yeah, they keep for their own fulfillment, yeah, and the rest they sell to the market. And this practice is have been centuries ago. Yeah.
But if, as you pointed out, the population is increasing very drastically,
Yeah.
like we saw from a couple hundred to 10,000 or so,
Yeah.
and the land is shrinking basically,
Mm-hmm.
because you have habitation taking over cultivated land.
Mm-hmm.
Then the resources and the production of rice must also decrease. Therefore, the surplus that they can sell
Mm-hmm.
to buy things also decreases. Am I right? I mean, it's very simple economics.
Yeah. Beside selling the rice, they also selling from the forest. The goods from the forest, for example, honey. Yeah, honey. So the goods from the forest they sell in the market, and the craft. Yeah.
Any handicraft.
Yeah, handicraft. Handicraft. They also sell it. And now there are many tourists come to the kampung. They also get money to become the tourist guide. Yeah, as a tourist guide.
That one they are allowed to.
Yeah.
They are allowed to participate in the.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I didn't quite listen just now. Are they an Aboriginal group?
There in Proto Melayu, no, not,
Not Aboriginal.
no. They closely to the Batak in Sumatra. Okay, I think.
The only community in Indonesia practice this kind of. Is there any other villages, another community somewhere else that practice the same?
Yeah, there are some similarities with other group, but the Baduy is still different. I think the time is up, and if we can continue our conversation after this. Yes, Professor, please.
May I mention that one of the first researchers on the Baduy, who are actually known in the local context as suku terasik dulu, ya?
Yeah, yeah.
Suku terasik, people who are before the mainstream society, and possibly probably because of the characteristics of the culture. So, for example, they would not go by bus or by train. Yeah, they would rather walk, right? So these are one of the two things that characterize them. Yeah. And of course, Professor Yudhishthira Garna, who presented his thesis in 1988, was one of the first pioneers, researchers on the topic of the Baduy. And I'm very happy that his students have come to present on the Baduy. Perhaps one day we can see the Baduy.
Inshallah. Thank you. Assalamualaikum
Thank you.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oh, yeah, yeah.
I was very young
Thank you, Professor Dede Mariana and Ade Makmur. Ladies and gentlemen, please come to the mic for Q&A. Now, I would like to call upon our next presenter, Professor Emeritus Dr. Omar Farouk. Professor Emeritus Dr. Omar Farouk is Professor Emeritus of Hiroshima City University, Japan. He graduated from the University of Malaya in 1975 with a first-class honors in history and obtained his Doctor of Philosophy degree in politics and government from the University of Kent at Canterbury, England in 1981. He was a Ford Foundation Fellow. Professor Emeritus Dr. Omar Farouk will present his paper entitled The Kampung and the Orthodoxies of Development. I give you Professor Emeritus Dr. Omar Farouk.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I have to begin this presentation with a couple of apologies. To begin with, this is supposed to be a paper written by 3 people, all from Sains University Sains, Malaysia, but 2 of them are indisposed. They fell ill before the conference. We had another conference, I think they were involved in that one. Prof. Hood was there, Dr. Mahazan was there. And I think organizing a conference can be very taxing. And it had its toll on at least 2 of my colleagues. The abstract that you have is not actually a paper, it's an abstract. And it's also an abstract which basically attempts to lay down on the table what we think should be the agenda for Kampung research. I'm not going to read the abstract. I think it's there, so you could take your time, read it, and maybe react in whatever way. What I'm going to do is basically to explain how this Kampung project came about, what we are doing, what we hope to achieve, and the significance of this Kampung research, which unfortunately has been either overlooked or completely ignored. Penang, I'm sure most of you are aware, is a very special place for many reasons. Penang was the island where the British settlement was first founded, and the British claimed that they established Penang, which is not quite true. They came when there were already many kampungs in Penang, but kampungs perhaps were organized in such a way that they would be sidelined by events which unfolded over the next 200 years or so. So this is the tragedy of Penang, where if you look at Penang and compare it to maybe other parts of Malaysia, it could be seen as one of the most developed, vibrant, well-liked by not just Penangites or Malaysians, but citizens of the world from all over come to reside in Penang under the Malaysia My Second Home project, which means they adopt Penang, which in itself indicates that there is a very high degree of affinity, of liking for Penang. But this has nothing to do with the kampung. This is, in fact, the new My Home scheme, the high-rise, the buildings which mesmerize some people are, in essence, a phenomenon which undermines the kampung. And what is so significant about this phenomenon, it is a phenomenon which is disrupting, uprooting, nominalizing, making people insignificant and unimportant. And I'm going to explain a personal experience or personal perspective of how the kampung has been affected in this critical way. I come from Penang myself. I grew up at a time when, I still recall, there were about 22 kampungs in the area that I live. But after having left Penang for a long time, left Penang for 40 over years, and when I came back, I couldn't find my kampungs or the kampungs. They have all disappeared. Of course, if you belong to this category of people who look at high-rise buildings, twin towers or whatever, and get excited, oh, we're going somewhere, you might appreciate the things that have been happening. But I'm more nostalgic. I think it's a tragedy that the 22 kampungs have been reduced to maybe 3. Out of the 22, 3. And even out of these 3, one of which will remain for a long time, I think, because basically of the fact that it is on wakaf land, so it is going to be permanent. The others became victims of capitalism, if you like. Capital came in, bought land, and this is not about race. It happens to all. The Siamese, the latest was this Siamese kampung. Some of you might have been following how this kampung has been targeted. Now it is not going to be a kampung anymore because owners of the land argue that the value of the land is so high, they cannot allow the tenants who claim to be the original villagers of this Kampung Siam stay at a nominal rent. It's their property and they have the right to develop. So this is the problem of development. For Kampung Said, which will be there for quite some time, I suppose, it is partly the wakaf status of the land. But if you look at the occupants of the houses, there are 21 houses. Most of the houses are without occupants. They have all gone to Kuala Lumpur. They have all gone outside. The houses are there. So what remains, just some old people, the elderly, basically. But in that sense, although physically the kampung, the village is there, socially it's dysfunctional. there is no social life. There is no organized life. There is a mosque, of course, which has been rebuilt. I thought the mosque would be the natural place where you meet your old friends, especially in old age. So I tried to frequent, and to my horror, the regulars, I mean, people that I knew, were not more than 3 or 4. The rest all have either gone somewhere, or migrated. And the majority of the people who frequent the mosque are the Bangladeshis. So it's a completely different scenario. There were, I think when I was a young boy, there was not a single Bangladeshi. But here it's all Bangladeshis. They have had religious people, they come. But I think something is drastically wrong with the way in which we conceptualize development. We plan our future. Because even now, there is no future. Now, what about 20 years from now, 30 years from now? Gurney Drive used to be my playground, you know, beautiful beach, a nice promenade, no food stalls in those days. But now they have cannibalized the sea. The developers have come. Why? The sea can generate the economy of the country, can make many people rich, or some people rich. So you find a lot of so-called reclamation work, development work taking place, turning the whole area into a factory, if you like, and robbing people, ordinary people, their right to enjoy the beautiful view which was conferred by Mother Nature, by God, if you like. Now it's gone. It's so dirty. Now who is responsible for that? This is, no, I would easily concede that I think it is unrealistic for us to imagine that we can bring back the memories of the kampung in the way or in the manner in which we used to know them. We cannot sentimentalize. This is, I mean, we have to accept certain things are gone. There are 662 villages, kampungs, in Penang. 22, this is on the island as well as the mainland. 22 villages are almost certain to disappear within the next 10 years or so. Some of you might be very familiar with some of the major villages in Penang, like Kampung Tanjung Tokong. This is a major residential area, one of the earliest residential areas. Tanjung Tokong is now almost gone. They have redeveloped it into a new area, reclaimed land, the Straits, they call it the Straits Key, where every house is about 2 million ringgit. No original Kampung Tokong resident could afford, I think, even to own a house of 300,000. Just imagine, 2 million. And this is also true with the high-rise. The high-rise buildings replacing the kampung houses of the earlier era. Now, the same is true of Jelutong. If you are familiar with Jelutong, Jelutong also used to be a massive kampung. Jeluntung is also disappearing. You can see by the day it is disappearing. And this is, I was told that I have only about 3 minutes left. And this is before reading the paper and the abstract, just giving the introduction. But I think what needs to be done, and this is why, this was the motivation, we need, first and foremost, to have good data and information on the state of the kampung in our case, in Penang. And we are already doing that. Our initial research showed, for example, that in terms of ownership, 20% of land in Penang, or only 20% belongs to the Malays, 80% to the non-Malays. But that is not the shocking thing. Shocking thing is even the 20% is not distributed equally among the Malays. Only some Malays, a few Malays, not even 50 maybe, own, you know, this 20% of the land of the country. So this is a serious problem of not just the kampung, but the question of distribution of wealth. There is a very obvious lack of equality in the distribution of wealth. And for the kampung, where I think it matters most and where it should be our concern is this, that the kampung for a long time has represented social capital. So it's not just the physical aspect of the kampung, not just the buildings, the mosques or the playground or whatever, but the social capital. How people collaborated, worked together, came together, how they were one, how they were cohesive, how they cared for each other. I think all this is disappearing in the face of the onslaught of development conceived basically in material terms. I think I will take questions here that might be more suitable. If you have questions, you have comments, please. No, this is also true. Now, my own initial research into ownership of high-rise condos by, I mean, it didn't matter which race. And I found that there was also a monopoly. Not all the Chinese. Only you can count them. So there is also, this is also a problem. In one particular case, there was one guy who owned 15 floors, 15 completes, all the floors. And that's only in that condo. I was also told that he has a few other condos all over the island. And this seems to be the pattern. Now for that reason, but I do not have hard facts. For that reason, I think we think that we have to have something like a census-like survey to get real data, because otherwise it is speculative and it is not fair. But I think basically to answer your question, there is also a serious problem of unequal distribution of ownership and wealth among the Chinese and Indians. Yeah. In fact, Indians would be even more peripheral to this development phenomenon that is taking place.
Outside Malaysia, buying properties. I understand that a lot of properties in Penang are being owned by people from outside the country. Do you have any comment on that, please?
Yes. Now, this relates to the concept of development that they have in Penang. If you have money, you can have virtually anything. So to buy, foreigners, you will have to have money, of course. There are conditions that are put in place. But basically, the property market is global. As far as Penang is concerned, it's global. You know, I mean, you can come from Iceland and maybe head the mafia in Iceland. Nobody is going to do a background check on you. You have the money, you come, you can, kind of subtle laundering can also take place. You know, money not laundering. In fact, this was pointed out to me, that some of these people who come actually are laundering money. I mean, they don't need to be here. But because the conditions are so loose, what do we want? What do, well, I don't know, the government or whatever, policymakers, basically it's money. So, you know, if they make money, they can sell, that's good for them. But they displace not just the locals, but also the opportunities that locals otherwise would have to own land, which is more reasonable. Sorry, sir, you wanted to? I have no idea. Yeah, because this is one of the, I was going to relate this to this concept of development, where one is only thinking in terms of, you know, money generation, nothing else. You generate money, that's good. Whereas something which is something more critical is lacking. Now, this may be different, but I would like to make this comparison. I would like to make this comparison. President Obama visited Hiroshima this year, and he gave a speech. I mean, the first sitting US president to have visited Hiroshima. And I thought it is bold of him, not only bold, but visionary and probably humane, when he said that we have made, referring to America, I think, tremendous technological leap, progress. That's a given. But unfortunately, we are lacking behind in morality. I think it's also the same here with Kampung. It's just money, 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 building, building. For what? Don't we have a responsibility to our own people, to planet Earth, for example? So, you know, I think that the same question can be repeated. There is, yeah, tall buildings can be constructed easily, but good morals, I think, take a long time to cultivate.
Prof. Umar?
Sorry,
yep. I have a personal experience of the Penang Kampung, being married to a Penangite. So when I first got married, there was Kampung Jelutung, Tanjung Tok Kong, and Kampung Aitam, and so on. But from the late, I think early 60s, they moved, you know, all these Kampung people moved to Kuala Lumpur in search of better pastures, right? So just now you mentioned the term victims of capitalism. I tend to disagree, because we think we are victims, but we're actually the doers. We're actually the people who create this kind of, you know, deterioration of values and so on. But I was also involved in a research project at UPSI, and we published a book on the images of the Jawi Peranakan of Penang. And one of the things that we highlighted was the values, yeah, the value system of the Mama Pulau Pinang. Brilliant, brilliant group of people, dynamic, business-oriented, and very, very brave and courageous. And they have brought these values with them to Kuala Lumpur. If you look around you, many of the top government servants and even corporate figures, Tan Sri Muni Majid, the KSN himself, they're all mamaks, yeah? They're all of Indian, ancestry. So although the physical village has been demolished, has been destroyed, they have brought with them the values of the village or of that particular group. So I think all is not lost. Thank you.
Thank you. I have my comments. Perhaps I'll tell you, whatever personal level. No, because I know the people who have been named, and I might be tempted to take exception. For example, if you say that these are mama, mama of the Jawi Perakan, what kind of mama? Number one. Number two, we are talking about the kampung. Did they live in a kampung environment? I think we have to know that.
My husband's family did, and they're very prominent business people now. Not my husband, but his brothers.
Yeah, but my point is the Malay kampung, because sometimes people tend to ignore the Malays rather than the Malays are Malays, not the.
By definition, they're Malays. They're a group of Malays.
Yeah, a group of Malays.
Referring to the Melayu Asli, that their forefathers married, then that is Melayu Asli.
No, I think the texture, the ethnic texture is far more complex than what is imagined. So I find it difficult, to accept that it is the Malays from Penang who have all fled or moved to Kuala Lumpur, and then they become successful, because there's still many Malays who are stuck. I mean, who are in Penang. There are many more, but you can identify them by their origin. I do agree. I mean, Munir Majid, look at his background. Father was a postmaster, so it's that kind of, and it was quite typical of a Malay, of Jawi Peranakan origin. Go to PFS. Sashim well, that's the track that they take. Sorry, maybe we will continue. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. I just wanted you to elaborate on what you meant by social capital, the social capital of the Kampung.
Social capital, basically networks which are created, the ties that are established, activities which are carried out on the basis of trust. So the creation or the existence of resources which are not necessarily material, but more social. I'll give you an example. In the past, in Malaysia, Penang too, when a wedding is planned, when a wedding in a village, people will come together. They'll build the tents, they will build the dais. They don't need any invitation card by word of mouth, because they somehow identify with a certain community or group. Now, to me, that is social capital. No money is involved, but you can fall back on the resources available in that particular community. Oh my God. Maybe I think there was one question. One question. No.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum to all. I think we have to step forward from the word kampung not to be associated to race or personalities. The idea of kampung, I suppose, is that part of what we believe to subscribe to the understanding of balance and justice. Here I would like to ask Prof, how do you reconcile this balance and justice of kampung, which is the Mizan, with the capitalistic nature of development as we see today? How do we reconcile this and to go forward, maintaining this pristine, romanticizing part of that definition of kampung, if you like? Thank you.
I think no other way but through education. Education in the sense that there must be discussions, there must be forums, we must involve civil society, we have to talk in the media, we have to raise concerns, because the very concept of kampung itself, you're right, has to be reframed. Because
that's easy to put forward, the word education, but we are here confronting two conflicting basic understanding of how to go forward. One is capitalistic, the other is not. The other demands balance and justice, unless you want to say balance capitalism. There is such a word.
I think
contradiction in terms, agree to disagree. I mean, these are phrases that I think we should really look into and bring this idea of Kampung Mizan forward to be part and parcel of a strong, cohesive structure and construct of society. I think that's my idea. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there space for one little comment? Come on. Big one. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Prof. A few years ago, a group of very talented young researchers from UKM they did a study on the urban kampung and focusing on the flats areas. The people who migrated from the kampungs, when they come to urban areas, probably the only place they can afford or they congregate are the flats. So they studied the percolating flats and other flats around KL, and they found out that, I mean, when people from the kampung, they come together, they have to recreate their lives in the kampung, and it's very communal based. For example, for the Muslim, from life to death, life is meaningless without the community. So it's a microcosm of the kampung life, interestingly. So it's kampung, flawed or otherwise, and that is a very interesting study. Thank you.
Thank you. I would go along with that. I think we cannot afford to be nostalgic. You know, we imagine the kampung, and it has to be a kampung in a different form. But when I refer to education as the means by which I think we could move forward, in many countries, for example, in Holland, the study of social capital is integrated within the government system. So which means continual monitoring of what is happening on the ground is done. I don't think there is any such a study here. Perhaps the government should think in terms of how to create. And this is something which transcends ethnicity. Thank you. I think my time is up. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Professor Emeritus Dr. Omar Farouk. Our next presenter is a teaching and learning consultant who has been working in Malaysia since January 2015. Her experience is in developing and improving school leaders, teacher pedagogy, and curriculum development linked to assessment. She has over 15 years of experience in London and is now working as an education advisor. I invite Ms. Sadia Kazmi for her presentation entitled Kampung Reflections, A Londoner's Perspective. Please welcome Ms. Sadia Kazmi.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. I just want to apologize for breaking from the norm. I don't have a presentation. I just have some reflections and observations that I've made over the time that I've been here. And I'd like to thank the other two speakers because it's really informed me already about some of the observations I've already made. I am an educational advisor from London, working to deliver the Ministry of Education's selected schools program called Trust Schools. I have been working with a Kampung school called SK Jerumbatu in Pekananas, Pontian, Johor. The school is in a semi-rural area close to a river, and most of the children live in detached houses within that Kampung area, surrounded by palm tree plantations. What I have observed has delighted me. Students between the ages of 7 to 12 years of age, willing learners, able participants, and enthusiastic about life. Children governing themselves with humor and friendship, with a real willingness to become able leaders. Leadership in this school, SK Jerumbatu, from my observations, must be coming through the Kampung life. Young students occupy themselves without looking for trouble, yet full of beings, full of life. There is a natural curiosity in students, yet enough patience to be led by others. An interesting mix in that one balances the other. With reflection to my own experience in London schools that I have worked in, I have found the same eagerness in the children back home to learn, to develop, to move forward, but often they lack the patience to sit still and listen. And my question is that a result of city lifestyle and the technological age causing them to become that way? In Kampung children, I observe a gentleness mixed with curiousness, a patience mixed with curiousness, and a shyness mixed with curiousness. These Kampung children have a level of confidence in being able to do and achieve tasks without the arrogance of knowing that they are good at it. Observed characteristics of the Kampung students is a willingness to engage and learn, a willingness to please, a very healthy respect for the elders than them, and a leadership in showing others how to achieve a positive result. A respect for nature and an immunity to greenery and their surrounding without taking it for granted. A calmness that allows for learning to take place, and therefore with these qualities, an ability to lead as future adults. The use of technology is present, but not in an intrusive manner that we are kindly experiencing, in my own experience, in England. Most, if not all, of the parents in the Kampung use mobile devices, and the teachers often use tablets and other devices, but they do not do so at the detriment to themselves or others during the working day. Having had the privilege to travel to many different countries, I find the Malaysian students and professionals easy to work with and accepting of change that is necessary for improvement in their profession. Malaysian colleagues are quick to act and very good at organizing events that include many stakeholders working together. Stress is not something that is evident in a visible form, such as shouting and disagreements. Just a can-do attitude exists. I have lost count of the number of times I have heard "can" when a question is asked about can we do something. I believe this lack of aggressive behavior is a result of living amongst nature. A recent article I read in National Geographic in the January 2016 edition discussed the effect of being around nature and greenery and its link to the positive mental health. Having read that article and reflecting upon it in the Malaysian context, I feel that there is some real truth in what has been said, and more research maybe needs to be done in Malaysia about the effects of living around greenery. People do raise their voices here. Children are children, but they're rarely throwing tantrums or demanding of parents. A peaceful coexistence is reached between children and adults. The above-mentioned qualities are necessary in leadership: a calm manner, a proactive can-do attitude, willingness to engage with new initiatives, some of the characteristics that support the development of future leaders. What is missing in the Kampung, from my own humble observations, is the awareness of the impact of poor nutrition. Too many children do not have sufficient dental care, and adults are unaware of the effects of excessive amounts of sugar and carbohydrates that are processed in their and their family's diet. When students were surveyed in the school about their favorite foods, they often chose processed noodles or fried chicken with sugary beverages as their choice of drink. Another area that needs research is in the lack of reading being done in the kampong when compared to the amount of television being watched. More facilities to occupy young Malaysians within the kampong, such as sports halls, youth centers, or libraries, whether they're mobile or physically present, needs to be considered. Often in my wonderful drive back from the school to the main city area, I go through villages and I see young students sitting outside their homes close to the roadside. Although this activity allows for conversation and develop social coexistence, it is not sufficient in itself to develop the whole holistic young Malaysian. Young Malaysians need good physical workout, as elements of this sedentary life may be resulting in expanding wastes during later life as well as in childhood, which is becoming apparent in some of the students that I've seen. With the adults in the kampong school, almost a large number do and are overweight, again because of poor nutritional advice. There are no exercise facilities within the community or park-like exercise stations that are now available in city parks. Social interaction between the adults during school occurs, and the emotional welfare of the adults is taken care of by the kampong, but not the physical well-being. I do not believe to this day that I have heard any kampong-dwelling Malaysians speaking about wanting the latest gadget or needing a new car. There doesn't seem to be a consumer society amongst the kampong, and very little is discussed about acquiring new possessions. The professionals that I have worked with in the schools have been very quick to develop and become good leaders. They lead by doing, proactive in their work, sharing and coaching others to improve in their pedagogy. Very much things in line with what they've learned from their own kampongs. The professionals in the schools are leading by working with parents, developing parents in how to improve learning at home, and supporting parents to become better leaders. As a result of the school support, the first female chairperson of the PIBG was elected last year. We are finding able women leaders within the kampong, and their support of the school is moving the school forward and engaging new developments and initiatives to further develop the student outcomes that we're working in. In Johor, the state I work in, the beautiful green landscape is littered with surgical scars of bulldozers, destroying the natural beauty and replacing it with concrete, something that the Professor has already spoken about. I feel that the kampong need protection, as heritage sites may be part and parcel of what is unique from my observations of Malaysia is the kampong. Malaysia has culture and identity. Malaysia has natural beauty. These are things I think other countries are grappling with, the identity of the country, the beauty of the country, and the contentment. The kampong is what makes Malaysia unique to me. It is what creates the peaceful, contentless nature of Malaysia. It is what is making the children as sponges, soaking up new learning, and it is what creates leadership in the young children as the kampong chiefs display and model mature, cohesive behaviors and values. Again, something that the Professor has mentioned in terms of social capital. All these elements are observable in the children that I have been and had the privilege of serving. What we have done in the schools that I have worked in is to provide avenues to allow for an expression of the skills that the kampong has developed. We have not created innovation and excellence, rather we have provided stimuli for the sharing of ideas, avenues and conduits that allow these developed skills to come to the fore. In conclusion, the kampong has given the people that are born from it skills that are needed to coexist anywhere, find solutions and problem solve. More importantly, the kampong grows leadership values and characteristics implicitly without having a shared vocabulary about it. And it does it through the modeling of its own social networks and adults within it. The kampong needs to remain, and the lessons need to be learned from it. I hope that the Malaysian people celebrate the kampongs like the children's cartoon Upin and Ipin does. My own children don't understand a word of the BM, but they thoroughly enjoy the cartoon itself. Malaysia needs to recognize the impact of the kampong on its own people. A healthy respect for the kampong advises for its people and recognize what it offers to Malaysia. Some of those things that in my experience we are searching for elsewhere. Thank you for allowing me to share my humble opinions. There is work to be done with the kampongs, but what they give to Malaysia far exceeds the work that is required to sustain them. Thank you very much.
Excuse me. Can you use the mic, please? Thank you. I can say that your observations are applicable in so many countries in the Middle East. So any action have been taken regarding the nutrition of kids in Malaysia?
There are now companies that are looking to work with schools and looking to work with the canteen staff of the schools to change some of those tasty tidbits that are processed foods and causing harm to something more healthier. But I don't know if that's an initiative that's coming through strategically or whether it's a recognition in parts across the country that this is needed and therefore it's in pieces rather than a strategic approach to changing the diet and the understandings of what is good diet.
If I hear you correctly, this is a program or a project under a trust school.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Therefore,
Sekolah Amanah. They call Sekolah Amanah.
Sekolah Amanah.
Yes.
Okay. Your pronunciation is
I apologize about
not
that.
Malay.
No, it's not.
Never mind.
Sorry. I apologize.
So it's a private project. Khazanah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. That means whatever you want to do in this school has got nothing to do with the government. Am I right?
I don't think so, because it has to do with it is the government who gave us these schools
The
through
money.
Khazanah.
Okay. Therefore, whatever you want to do in the school, you still have to get the government's authority. Like, for example, overcome excesses of sugar and carbo in the diet.
These schools have 6 major autonomies, and one of the autonomies within the school is what they choose to do with the curriculum, with the students.
Okay,
so they do
then.
have the autonomy available to them.
What do you use? What do you choose? What have you chosen to do to address excesses of sugar and carbo in their diet?
Thank you for the question. Within the company, we are trying to educate about how to have better nutrition within schools. There's opportunities within the science curriculum to look at nutrition and balanced nutrition. There is the availability of working with the parents, and I think that's the essential element as well, to work with the parents to educate them. And so under the working with stakeholders element, schools can invite parents in and do various different workshops, as well as do things like...
But to me, most effective would be in your canteen.
Absolutely. So there's a company called Makanla who is working with...
And they subscribe to this idea of wholesome, halal and tayyiban food.
Yes, they do.
Okay,
yes,
halas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's another question.
It's not so much of a question, but my opinion. I think when it comes to nutrition, the culprits are the canteen operators, because the issue of this junk food being served in the canteens everywhere. And like I remember when my children were young, we told them that they cannot take sweet and things like that. And in an examination, he was asked, what are the items that cannot be eaten? So he crossed out chocolate, which was wrong because it was something else. So that shows that this has been embedded in him, that these are junk food. But if you look at, I think here, MOHE or Ministry of Education need to have a proper standard of food to be served in the canteen. Thank you.
Thank you.
And make it mandatory.
I would just like to continue from what Tuan Ibrahim has mentioned. When you talk about junk food, I don't know whether you realize that our icon cartoonist, Datuk Lat, yeah? For those of you who are not familiar with his name, he's one of the foremost cartoonists that promotes Kampung. He's known as Kampung Boy, and many of his books has been translated. I think particularly the Japanese love his cartoon. Yeah? But of late, if you go to McDonald's, you will see Lat's cartoon promoting what they call a shock burger, and therefore you will see people dressed in kampung with songkok, just like our friend here, but holding burgers in their hand and hot dogs in their hand, you know, trying to promote this junk food in the context of what a kampung boy should be doing. To me, this is an utter shock, because he is a person who has personified kampung, and we have recognized him as the icon for kampung, and suddenly McDonald has got to him. So I am wondering, when we talk about kampung, how deep actually is this personification of kampung? Is it easily been bought, just like Datuk Prof. Farouk mentioned? It's all about material wealth at the same time, so that at the end of the day, kampung is another brand to be sold. So I take your junk food comment seriously, and it is something that we may need to think about, how you actually defend, quote unquote, the values and the characteristic of kampung as such in the context of food. And I would like to hear from Professor on that issue. Yeah.
Thank you, Tan Sri. I'm Jerry Boddicker from Oxford University. Actually, I did have a question on this before Tan Sri put me in the hot seat. But it seems to me, Tan Sri, I don't know what you feel, you've had so much experience in leadership at the national level and policy, that the issue of junk food and the issue of kampung land requisition have a lot linking them. And I think when you talk about junk food, you can't get mad at America and say they're selling their burgers here. You have to say which Malaysians own the franchises that bring the companies here. Now, I happen to know some, I'm not going to name any names, but they're very wealthy Malays, they're very titled Malays, there are very wealthy Chinese, there are very wealthy Indian families who own these chains. It's the elite in Malaysian society who bring the brands in. The brands don't come by themselves. They require people to buy the franchise and set them up. Junk food is brought into Malaysia by Malaysians. And I think that's not addressed properly. Nobody knows who owns the McDonald's franchises or the KFC or Chili's or whoever, but if you look and inquire, you find they're prominent Malaysians. It's the same thing with the land requisition, and that is that You know, you can look at Bhutan, which is off where I was in May, and I had the chance to do a video interview with a former prime minister who developed Bhutan's concept of gross national happiness, which sounds a little kind of funny if you don't think about it. It's been made a bit of a joke of, but basically they're saying gross national product, Gini coefficient, and so on is all about money. We're not an affluent society, but we can have development that is based on the fundamental principles of, is this going to benefit the happiness and well-being of our people as a whole? If it doesn't, we won't have it. So you won't find McDonald's in Bhutan because they've been through that exercise and have figured out it doesn't benefit the happiness and well-being of their people. And the investments and developments that they do start with that principle. And I think that Malaysian leadership could benefit from an exercise that shifts away from enrichment and often self-enrichment to a position of community enrichment first in terms of deep values. And I think that as I've been listening last night and this morning, what's coming through to me consistently is that there's a voice of pain coming from the people who belong to the Kampung world, which they see vanishing. There's some agony and helplessness about this, and a voice expressed in this conference. We want to bring this back, we want to stop it, we want to catch it. My personal feeling is that voice has to be shouted loud in your leaders' ears, because it's your leaders who are allowing the land to be sold. It's your leaders who are allowing the McDonald's and KFCs and so on franchises to be bought by their friends to sell junk to their people. And I think that the issue of failure of leadership and reprioritization of national values is fundamental to enabling the Kampung values, the Mizan voice, to have an influence. Otherwise, it is a desperate cry in the face of unstoppable, self-gratifying enrichment by an elite running the leadership.
Thank you to Ms. Sadia Kazmi. Our next presenter is a former Penang Free School student and a Colombo Blind scholar. He graduated from Victoria University, Wellington, New Zealand. He returned to Malaysia to serve in the Malaysia Education Service and work at the Ministry of Education and a rural secondary school. He was then appointed as headmaster of a secondary school in Negeri Sembilan prior to moving back to New Zealand. He served as head of social sciences and geography in an established college in Wellington, New Zealand, and also in management roles. He was the dean and senior dean for many years. Ilyas has maintained close links with Malaysia. His paper is Looking Back, Moving Forward, Evolving Villages, Culture and Processes, a New Zealand Perspective. Please welcome Mr. Ilyas Hashim.
Kia ora, harimai, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Po kare kare ana, na wero terua, whiti atu kohine, Mariho anate hine e hoki maira kamate aro di aroha e. Ladies and gentlemen, Po Kare Kare Ana is an iconic Maori song. It's actually the unofficial national anthem of New Zealand. Together with Kamate, performed usually by the mighty All Blacks, they represent the face of New Zealand, these two songs, the shop window of the world. And more significantly, they represent the renaissance, revitalization, and resurgence of Maori culture and traditions. Early on, I uttered some Maori words, and they signify the emergence and resurgence of Maori language as well. Those three words and many others have been incorporated in the English language and accepted as part of everyday usage. So the Maoris, with their culture and traditions, are fighting back, and they have established a foothold in the New Zealand society. New Zealand, basically, as a country, is a village. Why? Because it is essentially a nation of small towns and villages. There are only 5 big cities in the country, and the biggest, Auckland, has only got about just over 1 million people. But the total population of New Zealand is as much as Kuala Lumpur metropolitan area, despite having similar size, roughly. Malaysia is slightly bigger, but in terms of population, it is scarcely populated. You know, the kampung is a very romantic idea. We all long for what happens in the past, and we would like to share some of that currently. I was in Kuala Lumpur for 2 days and stayed on the 19th floor, high up there in the clouds. And I was having shower, and I saw a big pail there. You know, it brought me back my kampung memories. So I fill up that pail with water and take a bowl and throw it over my body. That's what I used to do when I was a little boy living in Kampung Baru. So, you know, we long for those kind of memories. We reminiscence about it. And, but we have to face facts and reality. The kampung is a vanishing act, and unless we do something, it will disappear in time. Country towns and villages in New Zealand face the same challenges. Many of them are disappearing or getting empty. There are nearly 20 to 30 ghost towns in the New Zealand countryside. Last night, we saw a scenic picture of Sri Menanti, the tranquility of the countryside. If you look over there, that's a country town. in New Zealand, the tranquility of mountains, lakes, and forests. New Zealand is noted for its pure green environment, and it is the marketing strategy of the country. Pure New Zealand, although it's facing a range of challenges with modern developments. Let's move on to the slides, please. That's Queenstown, by the way, in case in the background you see the Southern Alps. Beautiful mountains, but very dangerous because the huge alpine fault runs through the Southern Alps, and it's earthquake country, especially in the South Island and Wellington in particular. It's beautiful scenery, rural landscapes. Once my niece went to New Zealand and was in a place like this, Tiana. She was awestruck by the scenery, and she rang me. She said, "Beautiful place. I love the sheep. I love the mountains." And then she said, "Where are the people?" When you go to places like this, you don't find many people. And you can travel for 100 kilometers and see one person. So it is a country that can really move ahead in time. I wish to focus on the Maori, who are the tangata whenua of the land, meaning they are the Bumiputra of the country, the first people of the land. They hold a very special place in New Zealand, and New Zealanders are fond of the Maoris because they act as our shop window and contribute in a lot of ways. The Maoris migrated in the early days from Hawaii, a group of islands south of present-day Hawaii, the Polynesian Islands, in search of new lands, perhaps due to overcrowding and pressure from other groups pushing them out. So they traveled in long canoes known as wakas. They are big sailing canoes. And even though it was very early in history, they had exceptionally good knowledge of navigation through the night skies and stars and the moon. Somehow, groups of them landed on the shores of New Zealand. So they were the first colonizers, if you like, of the country, although when they arrived, there were some earlier Polynesian migrants known as Moriiris, cousins of the Maoris themselves, but not so big or not so ferocious. So they were pushed out of New Zealand when the Maoris came, and they are now found in Chatham Islands, east of the South Island of New Zealand. The Maoris settled when they arrived in different wakas. Different wakas designate different tribes. Maoris are tribal people. They belong to different tribes, and they don't like each other, even from the early days. So when they arrived in New Zealand, the different wakas landed in different parts of New Zealand, and they settled mostly along the coast, along the coastal areas, and river banks, river estuaries. Why? Because accessibility factor and also because of food resources. Initially, they were hunters and gatherers, but later on, they started to grow crops because they brought with them some domestic animals and also the kumara. The kumara is our ubi klede, sweet potatoes. So they love sweet potatoes and they started planting crops. So permanent settlements started to emerge. Now, the Maori settlements in the early days were basically fortresses. They were like stockades. Within the stockades, they have their huts and houses where the people live with their farms or veggie gardens, and also as a lookout, because these villages are usually on a hilltop. I mentioned earlier that the Maoris of different tribes didn't like each other in the past. They used to attack and conquer different tribes. And the tribe that got defeated the members became the slaves of the winning tribe. Sometimes a few of those defeated tribes got eaten in the early days because they were cannibals in the very early days. I hope there are no Maoris here. So things were pretty rough during the early days. But remains of those settlements, the pas we call them, on the hillocks, can be found scattered around the coastlines and river banks today. And they are regarded as archaeological sites and also sacred grounds because many Maoris died and buried in the place that they died, and it has become great significance today in terms of the ancestors. So the tribes are divided or structured in three ways. Firstly, every tribe belongs to an iwi. The iwi is the name of the tribe. Many tribes are found in New Zealand and they live in different parts of the country. The iwi is the big group, the major tribe. And the iwi is divided into the whanau, which is the smallest group, and the hapu, which is the middle group. The hapu are smaller groups of Maoris living with a clan, like a clan kind of setup. The whanau is the family, and the extended family, if you like. A point of interest for you is that our eminent Professor Hood has been adopted into the Tanui tribe of New Zealand, up in the North Island. And the Tanui are known as the people of the mist, because they live up on the mountain areas. Today, the Maoris are modernized, if you like, because there are no such thing as villages as we know it in Southeast Asia. The New Zealand village are basically Europeanized villages. They are structured along townships, straight lines of roads with feeder roads jutting out from the main street, and with permanent houses, bungalow houses, if you like, built as settlement. But every settlement is a community in itself. It's not much dissimilar to the Malaysian social structure, where the community spirit is very important. They help each other and there is more of a collective responsibility, like you have in a kampung. If there's a wedding, the whole village helps. Collective responsibility rather than individual responsibility. But that system is under threat now because of urbanization and migration into the urban areas. The Maoris have got very strong belief and values towards land and ancestors. They protect the land. They are sustainable people. They maintain the environment. They are often the guardians of the environment in New Zealand. Many of their lands, which are mountains and forests and rivers, have been gifted to the Crown. But the Crown manages them, but the Maori looks after them in terms of maintaining the environment. Very, very fussy about that all the time. In regard to ancestors, they have very strong relationship with their own ancestors. Let me give you an example. If today some developer is building a housing site or a highway, and they happen to find some bones, human bones, that's it. The whole project is stopped for about 1 or 2 years. So some cheeky developers will quickly cover it up and not tell the Maoris, because once the Maoris know about it, it becomes a sacred ground, and they have to do a lot of rituals to bless the area. So very strong relationship with ancestors, very strong relationship with the land. There's a proverb which says, what is the most important resource on earth? The Maori will say, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is people, it is people, it is people. And that's of great importance to them. Secondly, in terms of ancestors, they will say, my strength comes from many souls, many people, not just from one particular area. So they regard the ancestors, all the ancestors, the iwi ancestors, their own iwi ancestors, as being their strength. So even if today they find a Maori head, in the early days, Europeans used to take Maori heads. I mentioned to you earlier, the Maoris used to eat their own people if they are defeated. So some of these Maori heads would be taken by Europeans into European museums, and the Maoris will do everything to bring them back to the country where they belong. New Zealand is a drop in the global ocean. It's tiny. As you can see, we are the last bus stop on the planet. When you get to New Zealand, there's nowhere else you can go. Next stop is Hawaii, so, or the Polynesian Islands. It has only 4.85 million people, possibly the size of Kuala Lumpur. But we have 50 million sheep. That's a lot of sheep. And we have about 15 million cattle and loads of other animals. See the background on the left there? Countryside, full of sheep, green mountains, typical New Zealand landscape. And the Maoris are ritualistic, are traditional, when you greet a Maori at ceremonial functions, you rub noses, and this is called the hongi, and it has to be done properly. So make sure before you do the hongi, you clean your nose first. Otherwise, there'll be difficulty there. Okay, as you can see, very small population. The Maoris are the indigenous people. Let me tell you that as far as my research goes or study goes, the Maori as indigenous people are very well taken care of or looked after in New Zealand. Despite having initial problems, the government has settled loads and loads of the treaty claims. And the Maoris have received a lot of compensation from lands that have been confiscated in the past. So the government is doing its best to repay the debt to the Maoris. Next, please. Yeah. New Zealand is basically a food bowl of the world. It is agrarian in nature. It is pastoral in nature, with loads of activities coming from the land. And agricultural activities bring a lot of income into the country. At the same time, they support a lot of towns and villages. And many towns and villages survive and depend on work from the land-based industries. Many towns are one industry town. If that industry closes, the town closes. And this has happened on a number of occasions, especially if the town is dependent on freezing work, or forestry town, or a dairy factory. And many dairy factories have been amalgamated or closed down, so people have to move out. In the last 50 years or so, since 1970, population of New Zealand has changed from a bicultural nation of Maoris and Europeans into a multicultural nation with diverse ethnic groups coming from every part of the world. Today we have like 220 ethnic groups or more in New Zealand, but the majority are European, of European background, which make up about 65%. The Maoris make up about 12%, the Asians about another 12%, and Polynesians another 10%. So, plus loads of small other ethnic groups. So it is diverse. So the kampung or villages are under threat, and they have difficulties to survive because of the processes of migration, urbanization, industrialization, globalization, and so on. So how is it fighting back? They are bringing kampung values, if you like, rural values, into the city. Let me give you an example. In the cities, maraes have crop up. Maraes are Maoris' meeting house. It's the social hub of the community where the Maoris meet, and then there they revitalize the language, the culture, the traditions, bringing back the kampung ways. Even Asians are setting up like kampung ways where they build big houses, but 3 generations living, and extended family system. The Polynesians have brought their own kampung ways into New Zealand. It's a bit difficult with the Polynesians, Samoans, Tongans, and all that. They are transplanted overnight, basically from a third world nation, village nation, to a first world nation. So there is no transition. So when they arrive in New Zealand, they bring their village ways with them. For example, they will cook in the backyard. They will cook in the ground by digging holes and things like that. So many of their houses also have been burnt because they cooked the village ways in the house, and things got out of control. I'm running out of time. I have loads more stories to say, but what I can say is that definitely, absolutely, the village is under threat, not just in New Zealand, but on a global basis. But communities are fighting back to bring some of those values into the urban setting, to make them feel more belonging to their old community. So culture is coming back, traditions are coming back through the maraes, through the community systems. Even the Muslims, there are only about 50,000 Muslims in New Zealand. They are mostly Fijian Indian Muslims who have escaped into Australia and New Zealand after about 5 coups in Fiji. So they bring the Muslim way of life into New Zealand as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for listening, and the Maoris have done well. I must tell you one last thing is that the Maori economy is very strong, rising very rapidly, and worth about 50 billion New Zealand dollars at the present time. So it is imperative that the Maoris are successful in New Zealand. Thank you very much. If you have, I have time for questions.
Yes.
Yeah. You're welcome to ask a question or two.
Question?
One of the questions that people ask me in the past, if there's no question, yeah?
Okay, hang on. Can you please use the mic?
I was curious if you know that I read of a study of the Maori belief in their ancestors and how, and you spoke of the importance of that. And what it occurred to me is that I read that they're basically patrilineal cognatic clans, but they believe that the clan that you'll be in has to do with where your umbilical cord was cut. That's the land that pertains to you. So land is important to them. I was wondering if you know about this issue of the umbilical cord and its connection to the land of the person when they're born.
It's a bond. It's a bond that's attached to it. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. That's is part of the myth.
Yeah, where they bury
stories,
the umbilical cord. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So it happens as part of the tradition, but the land is because they believe in the old traditional ways. You must understand the Maoris have many gods: god of the sea, god of the land, god of the forest, and they believe that you have to respect the land for what it provides or gives them during their lifetime. And the mountains are sacred because they are the head of the system, what they believe. Yes, Professor.
Okay. Is foreign ownership of real property allowed in New Zealand?
Yes, yes. That has become a very contentious issue of late. People are very sensitive about that because they do not want to sell New Zealand properties to foreigners too much. But the funny thing is that today in New Zealand, most of the businesses are owned by foreigners. There are five big banks in New Zealand, but they are all Australians. There's only one New Zealand bank. The funny thing also is that they don't mind so much the Americans coming in, the British coming in, the Australians coming in, but the moment mainland China want to buy something, big trouble. They do not want to see, but they don't mind the Japanese. It's a funny thing, because I think the mainland Chinese are new into the advancement market, and they buy the farms. As I said, the farms are sacred to the New Zealand way of life, basically, traditional, and they would like to see the farms in New Zealand hands. And they're not very keen on foreign ownership of farms. But as far as businesses are concerned, you can buy whatever you like as long as you can afford it.
Prof. Elias, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Here. Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm very fascinated by the way you start with the Maori greeting and the Maori song. Being quote-unquote a foreigner yourself, you have adopted and learned that. We have got also a language problem here in terms of indigenous language. I doubt whether any one of us can start with a Malay and a Malay song in the way you did. So what is the difference that you see in the context of using indigenous language in the context of New Zealand vis-a-vis what is been experienced now in Malaysia?
Okay. As I said, the Maoris are special people of New Zealand. They are accepted by the majority of the population that they are the tangata whenua of the land, the original people, and they have a special place in the country. Now, the Maori language and the Maori culture, Maori traditions are largely used by New Zealand to promote its tourism, promote its businesses overseas. The haka, which is performed by the All Blacks, for example, is a copyright, it's a patented dance, and only certain people can perform the haka. The haka is a war dance, so the All Blacks do the haka to threaten the other team, basically. That's why they always win, quite ferocious. Now, coming to the language part, it is accepted today quite broadly that many Maori phrases, Maori words are incorporated. Like I mentioned to you, kia ora is a common phrase. Kia ora means hello. Harimai, welcome. Tina koto, tina koto, tina koto katoa means greetings to you all. And that's incorporated into the New Zealand language, English language, and accepted as part of the language. Mana is another one. Mana to us means way, but to the Maori it means respect. If I say Professor Hood Saleh, a good friend of mine, has a lot of mana in New Zealand. When he goes there, the Maoris respect him a great deal. That's why they adopt him as one of their tribal members, you see. So don't mess around with Prof. Hood.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, for your presentation. I noticed that this morning, actually, that I haven't heard anything about nomadism amongst these indigenous people in this region of the world. In comparison, in the Middle East, for instance, or in Central Asia, most of the indigenous people are nomadic. So it means they move from one part to another seasonally. Why is it so? I mean, why do you think there is no more nomadism here?
Nomads. We have oceanic nomads, if you like.
Yes.
That move from the islands into the bigger countries of New Zealand and Australia. For example, the Maoris themselves go overseas. There are nearly 150,000 Maoris in Australia working there. So it's not so much as nomadic, but New Zealanders are very mobile society.
Yeah, but that's immigration, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, but in the present day, there are no nomadic tribes in New Zealand. Okay. The migration of nomadic, if you want to use that term, came earlier on from before the 18th century.
Okay. Yeah.
Present day movements are part of migration.
Yeah. And there are no semi-nomadics?
No.
No. No. Okay. Thank you.
In the interest of time, we have to stop the Q&A here, but we encourage you to continue having conversation with Mr. Ilyas. He is with us till the end of the day.
Thank you. Lastly, I would like to thank Jesse over there who helped me with the PowerPoint and showing pictures. Thank you. And also Professor Hutsaleh, USIM, and Bank Rakyat for making this conference possible and for inviting me to come. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Ilyas Hashim. This brings us to the end of our second set of presentations. It has been enlightening with knowledge about Mizan and the Kampung. Ladies and gentlemen, before we adjourn for refreshment, we'd like to present a small memento for the presenters. I would like to call Tan Sizul for this.
Thank you very much. Just before we adjourn, we would like to recognize the presenters for their contribution. Can I call Professor Hutsaleh to do the honor of presenting the memento? And as I call the name, can you please just come up? Can I have, the eyes is not so good, Miss Nur Hizwani Hambali to receive the first memento, small gift of books that is related to Kampung in particular. Professor Bailey, could you please come forward? Professor Miriana. Professor Omar Farouk. Professor, sorry, Sister Sadia. Professor soon, inshallah. And last but not least, Mr. Ilyas Hashim. Thank you so much, Hud, for that kind gesture. Now we have run in